Hello and welcome into another edition of At Home with the Who's. And to say that it has been an unusual year would be an understatement of the year as it relates to our next guest here. Today we are visiting with someone who has not necessarily had the luxury of working from home. In fact, you could almost make the case she's joining us from her home right now, which is the office. She is the head athletic trainer working primarily with football. Kelli Pugh, and Kelli, great to have you as always with us. I want to get to a little bit of a different perspective than most people have seen over the past year and look at it through what has been your unique lens. And let me just start by, asking you a simple question. I mean, being a medical profession in the medical profession, I know you were obviously aware of pandemics, but did you ever believe one could strike that would have such a devastating impact on the world?
No, I think I'm fortunate that I've grown up in the era of vaccines. And so the idea that there may be a pandemic in my lifetime had really never crossed my mind. So this was completely unexpected and nothing I was certainly prepared for, if any of us were.
What were the early indicators you saw that COVID-19 might have such a dramatic impact on sports?
Honestly, I think I was shocked when last March everything just shut down instantly. I had been kind of watching the news reports about it, but not following it closely. It seemed like a West Coast thing, and we were kind of insulated from it here in Charlottesville. Um, and so when that week in March, everything, all the sports went grinding to a halt. I had my children at the dentist that Thursday afternoon, and when I came out from their appointment, my phone had blown up with, "What do we do? What's happening? I don't know what you're talking about." And then I realized that all sports had ended. And then, within a couple of days, it was students don't come back from spring break. Um, we're shifting gears into home rehab programs for all of our student athletes who were in therapy at that point. So we just had to pivot like everybody else of, okay, we're FaceTiming with people. We're finding PT clinics that are still open. We're writing home rehab programs just to try to make sure there was some continuity of care for the student athletes that were injured. And and then we were waiting, just like everybody else, to see what happened.
Yeah, I mean, you got into a little bit, but what was that time like? Everybody's sent home, no one's in the office, no student athletes are there, but yet you still had to manage care for some of those students that were doing rehab.
It's challenging. We have some experience with that because we do that every break. When student athletes go home for winter break or summer break, if they're home for a prolonged period of time, we set up care at home, or we do virtual care with them, emailing home rehab programs and checking in over the phone. So that wasn't new. I think the challenge was normally we know that's coming and we had time to prepare, whereas this time we were behind, in terms of finding places that were open and then getting those referrals and appointments in place. And then from, March until May, it was a lot of watching and waiting and looking at schools that opened, prepared to open up in June. We had a head athletic trainers call weekly with the ACC, that we all just bounced ideas off each other. And how do you think you're going to do this? How will this work? How will that work? How do we do simple things like hydration, and keep it safe? And so we were fortunate in that we didn't come back until July. And so we were able to learn from other people's experiences of what did and didn't work as they reopened. And so when we brought student athletes back, July 1st, it was a fingers crossed, hope and a prayer. Let's see if we can do this.
How did having an organization like UVA Health there to assist you and your staff to know what to do, especially at that early point you're talking about when the decision was made to bring those students?
Oh, we're so fortunate. We're so fortunate to have UVA Health. Dr. John McKnight is our medical director. And so he and I were, writing protocols together. Dr. Mitch Rosner, who led the university response to COVID, along with Dr. Seafree, they they were just phenomenal resources to say, does this sound good? Does this sound like what we should be doing and reasonable, but also safe? So we couldn't have done this without them, because then once we started, we were testing. And so the clinical labs and the salivary labs were crucial in our ability to play sports this year, and their support was tremendous.
So obviously this was a taxing time for you and your staff, but give us a little bit of an idea. I mean, I don't even know if there was a typical day, but what was a typical day like for you during this stretch of time?
For football, we were testing 3 times a week. So we would test Mondays, have results in before practice on Tuesday. We'd test Wednesday, have results in before practice Thursday. Then Friday, an external company would come in and test, and we'd have the results back Friday evening. If we were on a road trip, we had already left before we had results back at the early part of the season. And so, the mornings your results are coming in, you're coming into work early and checking results on the computer and going down this spreadsheet of, 150 people, negative, 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 negative. And then, occasionally we did have the positive. And so then, they knew if I was walking out to team meeting at 6:30 in the morning, it was not a good thing, that I was going to be pulling some folks off the field, either because they were positive. And then after I talked to that individual, because I had concerns about contact tracing. So we also worked with the Virginia Department of Health on contact tracing, of, trying to get some groundwork from the student athlete of what they'd been up to the past 48 hours and who they had socialized with or had a meal with or ridden in a car with. And then just providing that, names and contact information to the Department of Health to help expedite their job of the contact tracing. When we were testing on Fridays and not getting results until after we left, we had contingency plans of how are we going to get a student athlete or a staff member home if they test positive. So it was a lot more logistics, and then just the time of testing. It was probably a good 12 hours additional testing every week.
Yeah, you always work long hours, but these hours got even longer, obviously, through this process. And then you add on the weight of what is obviously an incredibly difficult set of questions and responsibility that you have for the well-being of all these athletes. So all that to say, a lot of strain on your staff, working the hours, all these crazy circumstances. How aware were you of their mental well-being throughout this all? And what did you do to manage that?
We talked about it a lot, more so in the context of the student athletes' mental well-being. I think for our staff, it was, you're bound in misery sort of a thing, like, everybody else was during COVID. And so, there was some grim humor sometimes, and there were tears and frustration sometimes. And, we just supported each other throughout it.
Yeah, you talked about the student athletes, but what can you say about, look, how they handled the protocols, being 18, 19, 20 years old, young people that they are, and basically being asked to not have a social life? I mean, that had to have been a huge challenge.
It was so hard, and they did a tremendous job of buying in. That they are the reason we were so successful, is because they bought in of, keeping themselves safe and not seeing their families, and having a very minimized social life to basically the athletics group. They did a tremendous job, and I know it was hard, and we did hear that it was hard and that they didn't like it. Our administration was very firm in that this is not mandatory, that you can opt out and keep your scholarship, and keep your place on the team. If you can't do this, that's okay. And so I think it was them making that choice every single day of, okay, today I'm opting in, and I'll just get through today. But they're phenomenal, and their success this year was even more exciting because of all the sacrifices they had to make.
Yeah, pretty remarkable stuff. Any way you cut it. Aside from Zoom calls that we're on right now, what's something that you used over the course of this that will be beneficial to you operating moving forward?
So we transitioned, we had to limit the numbers in our athletic training rooms. We spaced out tables, we rearranged furniture. We started utilizing a technology called bookings to actually schedule appointments for the student athletes so they could go online and schedule their times. And that has been fantastic because a lot of times we would just get mobbed with everybody got out of class and everybody came in for treatment at the same time. And so bookings has actually really allowed us to, we know who's coming in, we know when they're coming in, and we can be prepared to take the best care of them and know that we won't have 20 other people showing up at the same time. So we're going to keep that.
Yeah, and obviously there's just certain things that change you unalteredly, as we move forward through this. But, after going through all of this, the medical support staff, you guys were named the winners of this year's Bus Mail Service Award. That's presented by the UVA Athletic Department, and it's based on untiring and devoted service to the athletic department. What did that mean to you?
It was so unexpected and so humbling. We did our jobs. We came and we kept people safe, and it was extraordinary circumstances, but basically we just kept coming to work today, every day. And so the fact that the student athletes recognized us was so humbling, and I really appreciate that.
Well, it was well deserved. And Kelli, here's to a year, God willing, very different moving forward to the one you just completed. But thanks for everything you did to keep UVA athletics afloat over the last year. And hopefully, again, everything's easy moving forward. And thanks for taking the time to visit with us, Kelli.
Yeah, it's my goal not to do any more nose swabs in the fall.
Here's to that. All right. That is Kelli Pugh. She is the head athletic trainer for UVA football and athletics at large. And happy that she could spend some time with us. We'll be continuing on in these series of conversations with our At Home with the Who's series. It will continue next week, so we hope you can join us then.